Victory Studios in downtown Little Rock, this is Capitol View.
And good Sunday morning to you. Welcome into Capitol View. I'm Jay Burr. An unexpected topic of the winter weather recently was the power grids. Texas forced millions into darkness amid strains on the system. Arkansas saw some similar happenings here in the state as well. And here to kind of compare the two and help us understand what's going on here is the co-chair of the Joint Energy Committee, is State Representative Rick Beck. Boss, we certainly do appreciate the time here. I guess just kind of let's look at Texas, let's look at Arkansas, kind of, you know, walk us through, from what you know, sort of what happened, why it happened.
Well, what a week. I'll start out with saying that, you know, I will tell you this. Earlier this week, I was shoveling snow on my driveway, and I remembered that I had left my shovels, in my house at Wisconsin, because I said, I'm moving back to Arkansas. I'll never need that. So, but that didn't turn out to be true. But this week was quite a catastrophic event. My sources tell me that you have to go back almost 85 years to find weather conditions that were this severe in our region as far as extreme cold and how widespread they were. So to kind of give you a quick overview, you know, whenever you have outages, you know, we tend to want to look at what happened, right?
Right.
What didn't happen, what are the faults. So I thought we might get a better understanding if we took sort of a high-level view. So first, I'll just step through a few of these, and I think it'll make things clearer to you.
Yeah.
First, we had extreme cold, and it creates an increase in demand on electricity and gas to heat our homes and business. That's really no big surprise. Almost simultaneously with that, though, we had with this increase in demand, we had a reduction in the wind in many other regions for our wind turbine fields are producing and generating electricity, and of course that capacity then was greatly reduced. We also had widespread snow in our state. It also reduced some of the solar energy capacity that we have here in our state, and as well as some of the other states in the region. The most common backup for renewable energies is natural gas, whether it's conventional or whether it's the turbine generators. Of course, firing up natural gas generators creates more stress on the natural gas transmission lines, pipelines, to get the natural gas to where we want it. So that was another factor that increased it. Because they really weren't designed for the cold environment, many of the generators that we had, this is more prevalent in Texas than with here, they weren't ready to run. They couldn't run in the cold weather. So that created some of those generators that being inoperable, which put additional stresses on the electrical transmission line and those limitations in Texas.
Well, let me jump in here real quick. So I guess how does, you know, Arkansas differ from Texas? Because I think a lot of people kind of understand now Texas is kind of their own power grid for the most part. I believe 90% of that state is kind of on its own deal.
Right, and I think that's a good question. The question is yeah, that I got a lot this week is, well, could this happen in Arkansas? And my answer is it didn't happen in Arkansas. Arkansas had a severe thing. We had very limited interruptions. Energy Arkansas, I was talking with them earlier this week, and they said those interruptions were typically 30 to 60 minutes in duration. So although we did have some interruptions, they were much smaller than what they saw in Texas. So you might ask yourself why that's the case. Well, the two major reasons I will tell you is that Arkansas has a very blended generating fleet. We have nuclear, we have coal, we have natural gas, we have hydro, we have renewables. Mainly, our renewable is mainly solar, but that blended generation fleet really helps. You know, when one supply is limited, like natural gas was very limited during this outage, they can simply shift to another area for energy. One other major factor that I would contribute to Arkansas's getting through this is we have two RTOs, which are regional transmission authorities, or excuse me, organizations, MISO and South Power Pool. Most of your viewers won't even know who these people are. These are two companies that work totally in the background And what they're doing is they're putting generation capacity online. They're looking at transmission lines, what's being stressed, rerouting transmission. And in the case that they did this week, they instructed Energy to, in some cases, to do some minor interruptions to make sure that the grid stayed up and functioning as it should be.
So I guess an overall scope of things here, and again, Arkansas different from Texas, so kind of take Texas out of the equation here. But is there anything that you came away with in this one? Is there anything that needs to be improved on or could be improved on when it comes to power sources and energy here in the natural state?
Well, I don't know that it's just for the natural state, just for Arkansas, but I do believe that one thing that was learning, and a point is, natural gas production, most people do not know this, natural gas production was way down during this. In Oklahoma, the Secretary of Energy in Oklahoma said in one field that had 800 natural gas wells, only 38 of them were producing. The rest of them were frozen up and couldn't produce. So that created, obviously, the demand was high and the production was low. So I think that's one thing that we might learn a little bit here, that to make sure that these fields are ready to go online when we need them to come online.
Well, everything you would ever want to know about how to turn your lights on, Representative Rick Beck provides that for you. Boss, we certainly do appreciate it. He's an electrical engineer, so he knows a thing or two about energy. Boss, we certainly appreciate the time. We should do it again.
Well, thank you so much, and thank you for having me on today. I enjoy, and as I always enjoy talking about electricity. So.
Yeah, you can't find too many of those who just genuinely enjoy electric talk.
That's true.
All right, boss, we appreciate it. He's a gamer at heart. You saw the headset there. Well, coming up after a quick break, we have more coming up here on Capitol View. You're watching it Sunday morning.
Interstate Battery has a battery for your every need. Our friendly, knowledgeable staff is located at 2020 Landtrip Road, right off 167 in Sherwood. It all starts with an Interstate Battery.
Come and enjoy a new experience in shopping for your home. At Aladdin Rugs and Home Decor, we have over 5,000 rugs in the latest colors and styles. Bring your pillows, your pillow shams, and sizes. We will help you select the perfect rug. We're #1 in customer service with 15,000 square feet of rugs, unique home decor, wallpaper, and flooring. Remember, buy today, take it home today, and save. Why wait?
Looking for your one-stop shop for all your boating essentials? Come to H2O Sports and Marine. From top brands and knowledgeable sales staff to quality parts and expert service, we're here to help you find exactly what you need. And now with locations in North Little Rock and Greersbury Lake, H2O Sports and Marine is here to get you out on the water in a boat you'll love with service you can trust.
Success Vision has incredible prices.
I got 2 pairs of glasses in about an hour for only $39.
I got my eye exam next door.
Success Vision has over 1,000 frames to choose from.
It's a one-stop shop for buying glasses.
12 years and the service keeps getting better. It's a 10 out of 10.
This is my 5th year with Success Vision and I'm happier than ever.
2 pairs for $39 in an hour for less. Come see us today, Success Vision Express.
This has got the steak and the sizzle.
The tots on this are just crispy and they're flavorful.
This will keep you out of my tots.
Sonic Extra Long Ultimate Cheesesteaks. Yeah, this might keep me out of your tots.
Watching Capitol View, Sunday morning talk focused on the political scene in Arkansas.
And welcome back into Capitol View. Another big announcement this week from a GOP lawmaker, or at least a former GOP lawmaker. State Senator Jim Hendren, kind enough to join us now to give us a little insight into that decision and what is next for him. And Senator, I guess, first off, thanks for joining us here. And then second off, I guess what kind of went into that decision? Because, you know, usually leaving political parties, it doesn't happen often, and I know it's a decision normally is not taken lightly.
No, it's not taken lightly, especially when you've been in a Republican family involved in politics as long as I have. But to be honest with you, Jay, it's been something that's been building up for some time. I continued to hope, even up through the November elections, that I would see our party return to some form of normalcy. I would see a return to traditional party platform and civility. But when I saw what happened between the election and January 6th and shortly thereafter, as I said before, that was a straw that broke it with me. I can't be part of a party that's going to try to overturn a free and fair election.
And obviously, and I'm sure you expected a little bit of criticisms, even from some of your now former Republican colleagues. What do you make of some of their statements, and kind of how do you sort of deal with some of that stuff?
Look, I got a lot of great friends in the Republican Party. Obviously, one of them is my family member, that my uncle, who I is in the Republican Party and really built the Republican Party in Arkansas. I love the Republican Party and what it used to stand for, and I appreciate those that are trying to take it back to that. And for those that want to continue to throw stones and nip, I'm just not going to be part of that. And it's not unexpected. That's part of my issue with leaving the party. But again, that's what I'm trying to say we need less of.
So I guess what the big question here is now is I guess would you still sort of say that you kind of identify to a certain degree as Republican and not necessarily, I'm switching to the Democrat Party, nothing like that, right?
No, my principles haven't changed, and that's what I've tried to let people know is the party has changed. The party of Ronald Reagan and George W. Bush has changed. We would never have allowed the kind of language, the kind of behavior, the kind of name-calling, just the kind of hatred in our party that we see so rampant today, and we see people emulating it at all different levels. The partisanship has gotten much worse. But as far as Republican principles, I still vote pro-life. I still believe in the Second Amendment. I still believe in fiscal restraint and a restrained federal government and a responsible state government. Those things haven't changed. But I'm not going to be part of an organization that is going to tolerate and, in fact, incite an insurrection and then try to brush it off as if nothing happened.
So I guess a lot of folks would venture to say, is this something that's more on the national level? Because a lot of times it seems like Arkansas tends to be immune to it, no matter which party you're a part of, to some of the more nationalizing of things. But do you think that's finally trickled down into the Arkansas GOP?
Oh, I do. I think there's more and more of a tend to nationalize state elections. I mean, we saw Bernie Sanders and AOC and Nancy Pelosi on push cards in almost every state legislative race, even though they have nothing to do with what happens in this General Assembly. I've said before, the General Assembly has become far more partisan than it used to be when I joined back in the late 90s, and I think that's to the detriment of us being able to get things done. So yeah, there's been a lot of changes, and it's gotten to the point again, to me, I had really hoped that we would begin to turn the corner and get things back on track. But when our leaders decided that they were going to declare an election stolen and lead rallies across the country, in telling followers that the election was stolen, and then they're surprised when they showed up to try to take their country back, that was a bridge way too far for me.
So I guess it begs the question, what next? We see you putting out the Common Ground for Arkansas sort of movement here. What do you want to try to do with that? And I guess would people think that, is this sort of a third party trying to come to Arkansas now?
It's not now. It may eventually evolve into that. But right now, I'm telling you, there are good people in the Republican Party and there are good people in the Democrat Party. And what I want to do is foster people and support people who are going to work together to solve problems and stop name calling and all the extreme things that we see going on today. So that is what I'm going to focus on, is Common Ground Arkansas, giving a home for so many people who don't feel like they have a political home right now. My 4 adult children are not comfortable with either party right now. So I want to try to build an organization that supports basically grown-ups in politics and tries to fray off some of the extreme. Right now, the only pressure that politicians feel from their party is from the extremes. Their fear is of a primary, so they continue to move further and further away from each other. I want to build an organization to reverse some of that.
And I guess just in your opinion, what you've seen, like you said, you've been doing this since the 90s. Why is it that in your opinion, that the extremes seem to be the more dominating voices on either side of things?
Well, in many cases, and it's getting more so in Arkansas, that the Republican primary winner is the de facto winner. So we start off with just discounting 40% of your constituents, because I have to win the primary and I'll do whatever it has to take to win the primary. Well, if the Republican electorate is more conservative than the electorate as a whole, you end up with people pandering just to that segment rather than to what's best for the state. So both parties have had this tendency, but it's gotten much worse with social media. It's gotten much worse with pressure from national groups, to where now people make their votes based on, am I going to get primaried because I'm going to get a bad grade from this organization or that organization. That's not the way it should be. It should be what is best for the people of Arkansas.
Well, it's going to be interesting to follow this, and I guess the next natural question to ask is State Senator Jim Hendren now considering a run for governor as an independent?
Well, I mean, I think every senator envisions a run for governor someday in their life, and they would probably be not honest if they said otherwise. But as I've said all along, I'm not ruling it in. I have considered it. I guess clearly if I do it at this point, it will be as an independent, but it is way too early for me to make that decision because, again, I have ruled out. Right now I'm going to focus on building Common Ground Arkansas. And if that is successful, then we'll reassess and see, because it may be somebody else. It may be a different race at a statewide level, or it may be several legislative seats. I want to build an organization that can have an impact, and we'll see which races that turns out to be the ones that we feel like we have the best chance for making a change.
Well, it'll be fascinating to watch, and we almost got him. We almost got him to commit to the governor's seat.
Good try.
State Senator Jim Hendren, now an independent here in Arkansas. Boss, we certainly appreciate the time, and I'm sure we'll have you on again to talk about Common Ground Arkansas. We appreciate it.
I hope so. Thank you very much, Jay.
You betcha. Well, when we come back, coming up, a 27-year-old making history in an industry that makes major impacts here in the natural state. It's coming up on Capitol View.
Central Arkansas Mahindra is the king of package deals, and we are starting 2021 with our best discounts ever. Right now, package deals start as low as $240 per month. Buy 3 implements and get a quick hitch for free. Mahindra, the #1 selling farm tractor in the world.
The leaves are beautiful until they end up in your gutters. But with Guardian Gutter Protection, you'll never have to clean your gutters again. Let us keep you off the ladder and protect you and your home. Guardian Gutter Protection keeps out leaves, sticks, pine needles, even those annoying critters. We offer a 100% money-back, no-clog, hassle-free Guardian guarantee. Call today for our holiday special or check us out on the web at guardiangutterprotection.com.
We've worked hard all of our lives, so when my wife and I retired, we wanted to spend our golden years with less responsibilities and more recreation and relaxation. That's why we chose Parkstone Place. Conveniently located in North Little Rock, Parkstone Place is home to independent seniors just like us. We have access to wonderful amenities like gourmet meals, housekeeping, transportation, exciting events, and more. We're now living our best lives in comfort and luxury. You can too. Join us at Parkstone Place.
Celebrate a better night's sleep and save during the extended President's Day Super Sale at Denver Mattress. Right now, save $100 on every $1,000 you spend and watch the savings add up. Or save up to $500 on select Tempur-Pedic mattress sets and get a free $300 Furniture Oak gift certificate. Save $100 on the entire Doctor's Choice lineup and check out the Summit Firm for only $189.99. Plus, 7 years no interest financing and free shipping. Hurry! The extended President's Day Super Sale at Denver Mattress ends soon.
Got one of the Jonas Brothers here, the least of them all.
I love Nick Jonas.
I won't be able to sleep tonight if you pick John.
Nick is going to be just fine, but he has to split his income 3 ways.
The Voice premieres Monday, March 1st on NBC.
Who are you people? We investigate scientific anomalies.
A woman was reported missing.
I think it's somehow connected to the debris.
What we're doing can change humanity.
Central Arkansas Mahindra is the king of package deals, and we are starting 2021 with our best discounts ever. Right now, package deals start as low as $240 per month. Buy 3 implements and get a quick hitch for free. Mahindra, the #1 selling farm tractor in the world.
We're watching Capitol View, Sunday morning talk focused on the political scene in Arkansas.
Welcome back into Capitol View. The GameStop's drama reached Capitol Hill last Thursday. Witnesses spoke on the events that took place in the stock market. Our Washington correspondent Basil John reports.
Thursday, California Democrat Maxine Waters and the House Financial Services Committee tackled the unprecedented events surrounding GameStop stock last month.
This recent market volatility has put a national spotlight
on institutional practices by Wall Street firms.
The investment company Robinhood and its CEO, Vlad Tenev, came under fire for eventually allowing users to only sell and not buy the stock.
In an effort to meet increased regulatory deposit requirements, not to help hedge funds.
New York Congresswoman Carolyn Maloney says Robinhood lacked fundamental fairness for average investors.
They were being treated differently than other market participants who could still buy and sell those same stocks.
What happened is unacceptable to us. To our customers, I'm sorry and I apologize.
Missouri Congresswoman Ann Wagner does not want Democrats to use what happened as an excuse to force more regulations.
To an industry that is already heavily regulated, that will prevent people from participating in our capital markets.
Lawmakers also questioned whether Reddit and the Wall Street Bets community manipulated the market.
We do believe that this community was well within the bounds of our own policies.
Reddit CEO Steve Huffman and Reddit user Keith Gill say the hearing is an important step forward.
It's alarming how little we know about the inner workings of the market. And I am thankful that this committee is examining what happened.
Reporting in Washington, I'm Basil John.
The House Armed Services Committee questioned military officials about the fight against COVID-19 within the military. Our Rashad Hudson has that.
Lawmakers like Alabama Congressman Mike Rogers and Washington Congressman Adam Smith are concerned about the vaccine rate for service members.
Obviously, at the top, is the protection of the force, active duty civilian and guardsmen.
It's critical for our national security that every service member, as well as DoD civilian personnel and contractors, receive vaccines as soon as possible.
Rogers says the fallout from the pandemic could impact troop readiness.
This is especially problematic for our service members overseas who rely on international exercises to maintain their proficiency.
Pentagon officials told lawmakers that vaccination is still voluntary for service members because the FDA only gave emergency use approval. The Department of Defense says full FDA approval could make it one of its mandatory vaccines troops already receive.
DoD has administered approximately 860,000 doses of the vaccine.
Robert Solis with the DoD says not only is the department focused on vaccinating their people, but will assist in getting civilians vaccinated as well.
DoD, with FEMA, has developed plans to support vaccine centers able to administer up to 6,000 vaccines a day.
Solis says there will be enough vaccines for military personnel by the end of July. In Washington, Rashad Hudson.
Now that the impeachment trial of Donald Trump is over, lawmakers say it's time to focus on how the Capitol attack actually happened. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi said Congress will put together a commission, much like the one that followed September 11th, to figure out exactly how the attack on the Capitol came to be. They're also expected to probe why the security failed so badly that day and whether or not rioters had support, either knowingly or unknowingly, from members of Congress. They'll also look at the rioters themselves and what kind of organization there was between potential groups. Congress has appointed retired Lieutenant General Russell Honore to assess the Capitol's security needs to follow the attack. Federal law enforcement has charged dozens of people with crimes connected to the Capitol assault, and some reports say the FBI is looking at roughly 400 suspects who could face federal charges with lengthy prison sentences. President Biden said he would be in favor of this commission.
It's, of course, Congress's decision to form this commission, as we've talked about a bit in here, but it's certainly one the president would support.
If this commission follows the modeling of the 9/11 Commission, it would be a bipartisan and include current and former members of Congress from both parties, along with other government officials both currently serving and retired. And some sad news. Former Congressman Bob Dole has announced he has stage 4 lung cancer. He announced that this past week. The Kansas Republican confirmed the diagnosis in a statement and said he will begin his first treatment on Monday. The battle-tested vet has dealt with serious health issues before. Senator Dole survived an attack while leading an assault in World War II, suffering life-threatening injuries which left his right arm and hand nearly paralyzed. The 97-year-old served in the U.S. House of Representatives from 1961 to 1969, the U.S. Senate from 69 to 96, and ran for president against the then-incumbent Bill Clinton in 1996. And we are back to wrap it up after this. You're watching Capitol View on Sunday morning.
I'm a club volleyball player, and I'm pretty good at it. I really like to run, get those tips up and stuff, but when my feet hurt, it just really is bad, and I can't get there because my feet are just this bad pain. I'm like, ow. So I told my mom, she took me into Good Feet, and I noticed that I've never really had the pain since then, so I really want to be on the women's national team. And I'm pretty sure that Good Feet is going to help me get there. My name's Taylor, and that's my Good Feet story.
See for yourself with a free personalized arch support fitting at the Good Feet store.
Come and enjoy a new experience in shopping for your home. At Aladdin Rugs and Home Decor, we have over 5,000 rugs in the latest colors and styles. Bring your pillows, your pillow shams, and sizes. We will help you select the perfect rug. We're #1 in customer service with 15,000 square feet of rugs, unique home decor, wallpaper, and flooring. Remember, buy today, take it home today, and save. Why wait?
Looking for something new or exciting to do? Maybe a delicious new twist? Join us for the Bucket List with Heather Baker. We'll have all the must-try things in Central Arkansas. The Bucket List on KARK4 Today.
Hello, I'm Mike Rainwater, and I applaud the efforts of KARK and Fox 16 taking a stand to create a safer Central Arkansas through their Victory Over Violence campaign. At Rainwater, Holt & Sexton, we do our part. So each month we feature a difference maker. We give $1,000 to a group or organization that truly makes an impact on the lives of others. It'll take all of us to declare victory over violence.
You're watching Capitol View, Sunday morning talk focused on the political scene in Arkansas.
That is it for this week. Don't forget, you can take Capitol View on the go. Download the Capitol View podcast, boom, wherever you get your podcasts. Also, make sure to check our website. We have an exclusive interview with Lieutenant Governor Tim Griffin. He is running for Attorney General. We asked him why he made that switch and a few other topics at hand as well. So make sure you go check that out. That is it for this week. We'll see you next week.